Welcome to The Human Element, presented by Whisk. I'm your host, Barb Bidan, and in each episode, I sit down with CHROs and senior HR leaders to explore how AI, innovation, and human insight are reshaping the future of HR. We'll explore how technology is reshaping leadership, strategy, and the role of HR by sharing candid stories, practical ideas, and strategic perspectives to help you shape the future. The Human Element is brought to you by Whisk, the leader in agentic HR and creator of Harper, the world's first AI HR generalist. Learn how Harper can resolve up to 80% of routine HR tasks autonomously. Learn more about Whisk at whisk.com. Welcome to The Human Element. Today I'm joined by Bradford Wilkins. Bradford is the VP of People and Organization at Cognite, an industrial AI company that's helping energy, manufacturing, and infrastructure organizations use data and automation to work smarter and also safer. So with a broad background in people strategy, leadership development, and HR transformation, Bradford focuses on how technology and talent can scale together. I am super excited to have you on the show today, Bradford. Thanks for joining me.
Really excited to be here, Barb.
I'm going to dive right in because I know we're going to get into some good discussion here. So I want to start by talking a little bit about your role in the company that you're in. How is Cognite applying its industrial AI mindset internally within the company?
Absolutely. So I'm really blessed to be at a company where data and connecting different components is at the core of what we do for our customers. And obviously, doing that for people is obviously integrated into what we do as well. So you think about Cognite, at its core, what we do is take a bunch of disparate parts that normally don't talk to each other. So you think about an oil refinery, right? Has 50 or 500,000 sensors that are disparate pieces of data. And what we essentially do is build a knowledge graph that connects all these different pieces and actually tells a story and allows an agentic AI layer to get on top of that. Well, a lot of times people and AI, so people data doesn't necessarily connect together as well. So you think about historically, even really in the last couple of years, right, we may have had people data like an engagement survey or attrition data or performance data. Even the most mature people analytics functions were looking at those in silos. And so one of the things Cognite has really been on the bleeding edge of is being able to look at that data analytically and then connecting that in the same way through a knowledge graph. So looking at that engagement layer, engagement data layer through performance data that's maybe being fed from the Salesforce data or from with our professional development team, a professional delivery team, actual customer satisfaction rating. So let's say, for instance, we might have a really high engagement score on a particular function, but they're low performing in terms of their actual output, right? Is that a positive or a negative, right? Or vice versa, right? Do we have high signals of burnout? And then we can go and pull metadata, for instance, and say, oh, are managers having meaningful one-on-ones? And what is that signaling? And where is that showing up? Is it showing up in other components around performance or speed to, let's say, a new hire, right? If a new hire isn't having meaningful structured one-on-ones with their managers in terms of their ability to accelerate, to ramp, to be productive, right? Is that actually impacting things or not? Are some of these traditional signals that, again, we may have been looking at as a people function, not just at Cognite, but across kind of human capital functions across the world, as we've historically maybe looked at in silos, just like how Cognite is building knowledge graphs, Cognite is also starting to look at these from a human capital standpoint across the silos and connecting those dots to see what correlations and causations we might be able to identify. And then obviously being able to build action plans, feeding those into Claude and being able to build real-time actionable insights through scripts that are pre-built that can help signal for people business partners to connect with managers, provide real-time coaching that again is not necessarily anyone really lifting a finger, right? It's now these real-time conversations, real-time signals can trigger Slacks. So a lot of really neat things are happening. And had you asked that question 2 weeks ago, you would have gotten even a fraction of that answer than had you asked that question 3 months ago, right? So it's every day is an exciting answer.
Oh my gosh, completely, right? You can actually go to the data with all of the sort of curious questions, right, around how things relate to one another. With all of the points that you've mentioned, like items out of Salesforce related to people data, do you have any good stories that you can share around how having this sort of access and being able to leverage AI in this way has helped you to move more speedily on something that you learned from the data?
Yeah, one of the groups I support is the professional delivery function, which is our professional services function we call value delivery. So we
Hmm.
focus literally delivering value to the customer. And so what we can actually do is through a precursive, which is essentially the kind of parallel tool to Salesforce. So we can actually track kind of what employees, where they're spending their time, where managers are spending their time, because again, 95% of this department is billable or at least funded, right? So they're not necessarily billable. So we're tracking our time. So we're getting real meaningful data and we can see from where are they spending their time, where are they getting stuck, being able to correlate that and figure out again, where are they spending their time. And for instance, we were able to find recently that some of our people managers were being pulled into, ironically, the sales organization, right? In fact, in very fresh off the presses, like almost 50% of their time was being pulled into either pre-sales activities or again, whether it be actual sales calls or a pre-sales, like creating kind of pre-sales work or kind of production levels things. And one of the ways that this kind of got signaled in parallel was we had a new hire that kind of had their first 90-day survey hit in real time that said, hey, I'm not getting the meaningful kind of connection with my manager that I was looking for. And so when I said, let's find where the intersection of those two things hit. And again, it was really easy to say, great, why is this person not getting that? Connect the data. It's great. Where is the time being spent? And again, this was really easy to do with AI. It didn't take all of 10 seconds to be like, oh, they're not being able to spend the meaningful time that's causing this disenchantment, slowing the ramp of the new hire because they're being correlated in time is something that frankly is not even part of their job responsibilities that they're doing favorably. And so now it's allowing us in real time to go and say, great, whoa, should this be part of their responsibilities? Let's actually look at job role and responsibilities. So we're now going back to the job family descriptions, relooking at that entire role and responsibility, saying, hey, should we carve that out in their role and responsibilities? And if so, what has to fall out? Because again, someone only has 100% of their time. Again, using
Uh-huh.
AI to be able to look at that and say, great, as we look at other companies, is this fall into this role and responsibility for this kind of EDF level role and responsibility? So being able to pull that into real time, look at roles and responsibilities. And again, this whole exercise that historically would have taken weeks and weeks was like
Weeks. Yes.
was like a 3-hour exercise, right? And so we said, no, this doesn't necessarily fall into this roles and responsibilities. So then where does it fall? And now we can go reallocate this time. And again, it's not a light switch that we can say, great, stop doing it, right? But now we've said, hey, great, now we've got to figure out where this goes. We've addressed this. And so now new hires that fall back into this, again, hopefully won't have the same kind of drop off in terms of their ramp. And then we can now also from a financial implication say, if I can accelerate ramp, right, what does that mean in terms of the actual cost per hire? I can actually put real quantifiable dollar value to this as well. So it's not only just, oh, this a happy employee, which obviously, again, I kind of always talk about a tree, right? An employee has to be happy, but the roots of the tree have to be rooted in business value as well. So now we've got both happy employees, but also rooted in business value because I can accelerate ramp time and decrease the cost of hire.
Yeah, I mean, in that one example, one piece of team member feedback led to at least I counted 2 or 3 immediate things that
100%.
could be addressed and fixed where prior to this, right, could that have instead looked like multiple pieces of new hire feedback across multiple new hires
Right.
who weren't having a great experience, who maybe left the organization prematurely, et cetera. I'm not
Right.
saying that happened with you, but
No,
that's what it could have looked like before. And
no, no.
instead, it nearly immediately turns into solving 3 things,
To
right?
your
That
point,
is amazing.
those 90-day onboardings, they pile up. And again, so I'll look at them at the end of the quarter or the end of the year, maybe even I'll aggregate them, whatever, or they're qualitative versus quantitative. Instead, being able to like real time trigger, real time connect that to actual data orientation. No, it's incredible. And now, to your point, within a week's time, we'll have kind of everything at least on track to be resolved with some level of acceleration that, again, will mean that every new hire in this department thereafter will hopefully at least can be back on.
That it's such a great story of shortening the time from signal to action to result, which I think is awesome. So I want to shift gears just a little bit, take you into the realm of more HR operations. What are the areas within HR operations where you think there's the greatest opportunity more immediately for automation or augmentation through AI?
Yeah, honestly, infinite ones. I think anything that's let me first start with this filter. If all you're doing is putting AI as an augmentation on top of a bad process, you're just creating a compoundation of a bad process. So that's, I think, the danger. As I talk to friends in AI, talk to friends in HR, that they're like, "Oh, I'm just adding AI to the back of this bad process." That's actually literally the worst thing you could do right now.
Yep. Start with the work. We've said that a lot on the show. Start with the
Well,
work first.
absolutely. And we've taken the mindset here at Cognite, we talk about AI first, right? Our CPO actually, she wanted to stay AI native, but you can't be AI native if you actually aren't AI native. So we say AI first, right? And that
Yep.
by that we mean that the first lens in which everything that we put through is like, why can't it be AI, right? Let's push it through that sieve, that cheesecloth, if you will. It has to really get through that. And then what's left on the other side, then you can figure out what can be human capital or what can be other process configurations or things like that. And so you think about anything that can be manual, any kind of responsiveness, anything around those lines, like that's base layer stuff, right? Honestly, if you're sitting here in mid-April and anything around like employee queries or benefit queries or anything like that, hopefully is any kind of ticketing system, any of that. If that's
Yep.
not automated by now, hopefully your organization is getting behind you and you're able to get that going. The next layer that I'm seeing a lot of really neat pieces is any kind of coaching. So again, Claude, it's the soup du jour, but you can layer it into your Slack, get some really neat insights, even around if you're putting it into your interview, even if you use like a Gemini to transcribe your interview. What I found is some really basic stuff like, hey, evaluate this person's ability to do behavioral interviewing. And managers, in my experience, generally want to be better. Again, there's an outlier to that question, but 85, 90% of them want to be better. And it's really amazing when you can put in front of a manager, hey, 90% of your questions were close-ended questions, or you were
Mhm.
selling, or in this meeting, you talked 85% of the time. And just even being able to use it for some really basic coaching layer stuff. Again, it's funny what an objective outside view in terms of business partnering and helping from a coaching standpoint can do as well. So there's that layer of things, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, anything around drafting, removing, again, whether it be adding empathy, whether it be removing emotion from things, right? Again, finding your unique voice, all that kind of stuff, job descriptions, standardizing templates, finding best practices, all that's, again, that's got to be completely automated by this point. Internal comms and any kind of presentations. Like if you're putting up a presentation right now that doesn't look executive ready, again, zero excuse for that, right? And I'm just like, I'm riffing, but this is all 50% of my job is gone at this point, right? And there are people who are resisting that because of like, what else do I do? It's so exciting. We're getting to do the really meaty, strategic and empathetic work, the stuff that frankly, I don't think AI is going to be automating for a long time. It's the really interesting work. But if you've rested your laurels on this very basic manual stuff and you're afraid of letting go of that, understandably, because maybe that's how you cut your teeth for the last X number of years, right? If you don't let go of it, it's going to be pulled away from you really quickly. And again, I could keep going, but I think you get the idea that there's just
No, I'm going to give you the opposite side of this same question because I bet you that what you're doing with all the time that you've saved is
yeah.
you're doing the work that used to form the 100% to the 150% of so
Right.
many of our jobs in HR. So in with that extra time, what are the things that you are finding still require the human touch or are feeling to you like they're going to stay central to things that you want to be working on personally?
Yeah. So the thing that's I think most exciting still is really around team composition. And that's everything from workforce planning to interconnective kind of how do people talk to each other? How do they work together? I just saw a really interesting study come out of the University of Queensland talking about the value of group intellect. So I think as people, we've always worked with skills matrices to understand how to build teams together or personalities to understand how you're building different personalities that interact well together. But this really talked about actually the compounding layer of IQ together and how those kind of synapses can fire together. So that was really interesting. And I think, again, the way you create teams together has always been really interesting to me. I love the book Multipliers. And I think,
Mhm.
again, that is going to continue to be just this abstract because it's human capital. And the thing I've always loved about our craft is you're in trying to increase probability, knowing certainty is impossible because it's people still, right? There's things outside of our realm of control. And AI is always trying to hit zeros and ones, right? Human capital will always have an uncertainty component to it. And so any variation there of coaching, I think empathy, right? Again, as we continue to be able to have access to this data and these analytics and these tools, it still will require us to be able to look at it through the lens of the culture and the value system that each company is going to want on the spectrum of, do we want to be this kind of cold-hearted, like top grading, really aggressive company? Do we want to be this super empathetic, right? Family company? Somewhere in between those two. And there's no wrong answer to any of those components, right? And so again, each human capital practitioner has to be able to look at the outputs of these AI tools through that different lens and be able to make these judgment calls, whether that be about promoting, whether it be about hiring, whether it be firing, right? So making those decisions around that as well. And then obviously, again, AI is only as good as the input and the output and the different pieces around there. So again, the reality is, it's funny, I was talking to one of our operations leaders earlier today and talking about kind of the acceleration that I'm seeing through AI. And we were talking about how some parts of the company are getting that and some are not getting it. And I was like, I don't understand why other people are not getting it. She's like, Brad, because some of your inputs are actually really thoughtful. And she's like, you're spending the time building the scripts, you're spending the time making sure your prompts are well thought through, and you're actually spending the front side of the work. If you skip the front side of the work, or the practitioner isn't there on the front side of the work, right? Then your middle point of the work, the kind of the whatever you want to call that machinery, right? That still won't be there, right? And so there's still that element as well. So
Yeah, so
again,
it sounds like spending some time getting yourself really good and adapt the new AI tools that are in your toolkit, but also just spending some time thinking, right,
yes,
about these deeper topics, right? Like org design and teaming, and how do you build a team that has, I loved the group and intellect comment that you made, right? How do you build a team whose collective IQ is off the charts, right? And those are just things that take some deep thinking. So, and because you brought up the topic of folks in other areas of the business, like why is this taking off here, not taking off there? What steps are you finding are most effective to build trust among leaders or employees when you're trying to do this work of introducing AI into your workplace?
yeah, no, to your point, trust is a really important thing. I alluded to it in our own practice area, where a lot of these areas, you're essentially telling people you're taking big parts of their job and chunking it away. Take, for instance, engineering, right? You're essentially, in the next X number of months or years, right? You're saying you're no longer coding, right? Now you're going to focus on the left of the code and the right of the code. And what does that mean for your role and your profession? And I think it's really important that you help them to visualize how you as a company are going to be part of that journey to upskilling them and visualizing for them from a career path, from a role and responsibilities, what that is going to look like. And not just, hey, stop, you're not going to code anymore, right? The code, I'm making a number, 90% of the code is going to be generated by AI now, and you're going to focus on the left of the code and the right of the code. Like, it can't just be this is what's going to happen. It's, here's how we're going to do it. Here's what your role is going to be in it. Here's why it's exciting for you. Here's what your future is going to look like. And again, will there be people who don't buy into that? Of course, but it's got to be done. And back to even your previous question around what are we doing as HR practitioners? Those are empathetic, sometimes one-on-one or small group conversations, even taking companies on these journeys and these small conversations. And it's interesting because, and I had this conversation a lot of times, it also is dramatically changing the hiring profile, because no longer are we, in a lot of these cases, being able to hire someone with 5 years of experience. Are we hiring even more so than even, again, I think this has been a trend for a while in a lot of SaaS companies, growth mindset and fluid intelligence and all these big buzzwords, but this kind of curiosity and growth mindset and the ability to adapt and learn new things as technology is accelerating even quicker, that's more critical than ever. And so creating safe places, traditional learning and development and micro learning is now really about kind of show and tell and creating safe places where people can learn from each other, and that type of enablement and kind of sandboxes, and actually creating, back to your point on space and time, right? It's not filling their brink with all this, hey, here's 40 hours of work. It's actually, you have to create some space for them to be able to go and learn some of these new skills and share it with each other along the way as well. And so that's also part of the journey, and making sure that they feel like they've got the space and time to be able to be successful as well.
That you re-mentioned one of my favorite insights from a different episode of the show where it's like when you create or when you create an opportunity for your teams to have space, let them use it for
Yeah.
good. And some of this learning that you're talking about, don't immediately like pour into it and fill it up. I think that's a big one to build trust. And I loved what you had to say about visualizing. Like they need to actually see it. They're
Right.
not just going to take your word for it. Whether you're saying, this, don't worry, your job's not going to be lost, which is not a statement I agree with saying, or
Right.
like the sort of don't worry statements with no substance without actually helping them visualize. So I really love the way you talked about, you actually said painting a picture, like you need to take them on the journey with you so that they can see what their job will look like after this and that they're excited about what that picture also looks like, I think.
The other thing I just had a conversation, interestingly enough, and again, this is not super progressive, but it's funny. Some of these conversations, again, different people are on different stages of their kind of journey. Um,
Totally.
the as this is happening, obviously, companies are growing and revenue per employee is going up theoretically at a lot of companies. But this idea that you're no longer going to necessarily be a manager of people always, right? That some of
Hmm.
those boxes in the org chart is actually going to be agents, right? And so I was talking to someone who had a small team, and he was saying, "Hey, how does my team grow? They can't just have my job. And if we're going to be leveraging AI, then my team is not necessarily growing, which means there aren't management roles." I said, "There might be management roles. They're just not management roles of people." And you watch the light switch go off for him. And it was really exciting to see, oh, wow. So they could be managing a bunch of agents, right? And I'm like, yes, look, and they've got to be able to think about that. And again, different people will be very accepting of that. Some people will be
Hmm.
very resistant to that. There's somewhere in between those two things for most people. But if they start thinking, and like, even as HR practitioners, that our role is actually as we're designing these orgs, and I think not a lot, the early adopters of AI, a lot of chief people is adding AI to the end. It's chief people and AI officers because org charts are starting to include agents in the boxes, right? And you say you're an IC with 6 direct reports and they all are agents, right? I think that's where a lot of these organizations are starting to go to, or start the early adopters are starting to go to. Right? Lots of
Yeah.
early, the
Right.
early,
It is a spectrum. I love it. I try to do the same thing. I don't want to make anyone, there are people that are way ahead and that we all
yeah,
look up to and get ideas from, but it's moving so fast that like wherever people are on this spectrum of learning, no, don't panic. Like you're not
no,
too
exactly.
far
So you're
behind
talking
or
there's some
anything like
places that
that.
aren't even letting ChatGPT in the organization yet. And I think that's
100%.
part of the thing is like you find like anything, right? I mean, it just whether it be that when we were doing progressive performance reviews, right? I mean, anything, it's just find your early adopting department, right? Who's going to be super excited by it. Figure out who's going to be your adopter, figure out your resistors, get your
Hmm.
adopters the value, find your middle point, then they slowly come along. Your resistors eventually will be the last ones in, and then they'll jump on board. And it's like any other initiative that we've done.
Yep.
It's just,
Just a really big
yeah,
change
exactly.
management project.
Transformational. Wow.
Just big. But it's change management, right? And it's the things that we need to do to bring people along and bring them with us
Yeah.
on the journey. I know Cognite helps clients with AI, and you're
Yeah.
talking about the type of literacy that you're needing to build within teams. I would love to hear how you and your HR team are playing a role in helping the company make that cultural shift, and maybe even some of what you're doing to kind of skill build within the teams in your company.
Yeah, no, interesting because Cognite, when we just had this conversation this morning, so IT sits today in finance, as it does in a lot of companies. And then learning and development actually sits in our value delivery function because most of our learning is actually for customers and partners. And then that actually serves our internal groups as well. Although we're hiring a new leader for that function. And one of the things I told them is that their fourth customer is going to end up being large language models as well. I think learning and development functions are going to be the owners of training large language models of the future, but that's a whole nother
Mhm.
podcast. Probably. And then we've got us. And I was talking around IT, I think eventually is probably going to, and I've actually owned IT in my past lives as well, because I actually think it's going to start shifting back into the HR function because it's just so organically piece. So today we're trying to partner, right? So IT is owning all these, Claude licenses and Gemini licenses and Copilots and notebook LMMs. And it's today, these are tools, right, that they're out there enabling. We're here talking about reimagining the ways of work and running workshops and org designs and things like that. And so there's still probably in a lot of cases a bit of a chasm between those two. So it's like,
Mhm.
how do we push those even tighter together? But so I think where people is really pushing it is focused on kind of roles and responsibility, ways of work, org design. That's where we're making the largest piece. And then calling over to the IT department, hey, in order to make this real, here's where we need the tools and the resources, which is where, like, for instance, Claude wasn't on their roadmap, or at least was accelerated on their roadmap for us across all of the functions. And now it's like, I don't know how many licenses we just got procured in the last couple of months here, but it's just got accelerated along the way. And so that's really probably the first piece. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it's really about creating these kind of small, I call them learning labs, right? Because it's about environments where they're more workshops than kind of trainings. We're not doing a lot of, oh, come sit in a classroom type environment or take online classes. It's actually people who are finding our early adopters who are sharing what they're doing and then actually going and clicking around with people and helping them set up their own pieces. It's a lot of show and tell. And so that's the people practitioners, the people business partners actually being really tight to the ground, burrowing down in the mud, figuring out who are those early adopters, where are we getting the traction, and again, using our own kind of data that we're tracking to see, hey, where are we seeing some acceleration of productivity, again, whether that be from a productivity on the engineering side or a delivery side or a sales side, like where are we seeing unnatural acceleration of productivity or results, and that's giving us some signals very quickly of who's using it. It's not an accidental correlation there. And that's
Mhm.
actually where then go drilling in, like, oh, look, the SVP of PMO, you're using AI. I can tell because your output is outpacing the other peers in your group pretty significantly. And then going and pulling that out. The other piece we're starting to do is in each of our business units right now. And again, whether this eventually gets centralized or not is a discussion we're having, but is circling and saying, hey, value delivery, this is your AI champion who's going to really own making sure that this kind of gets embodied and championed. So it's not just today in some functions, it's more organically happening, but
Mhm.
actually saying, waking up every morning thinking about this is something that needs to get done. And so that's just now starting to happen, I think, across some of the non-obvious functions. So it was already like that already was a role within like engineering, for instance, but
Mhm.
now it's happening in sales and now it's happening in the delivery organizations. It hasn't necessarily been a function in people because we are eating our own dog food a little bit. But I think, again, in the finance organization, for instance, it's a role that we've talked about even hiring and saying, hey, who's going to wake up and go with deal? And maybe it's a G&A role, right? That can call it because maybe that doesn't need its own wake up every single morning and be AI. But
Mhm.
again, it's about intentionality, right? It's not necessarily, like, oh, hope it happens, right? Or count on these kind of low hanging fruits to pop up because there's
Right.
just so much. And again, if people then wake up thinking about back to that cheesecloth analogy, right? AI first, right? And there's someone pushing everything through the cheesecloth, then we all of a sudden need someone there on the front side.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying there, I think, is that person's waking up being the champion, right? It's not
Yeah.
that they own AI,
No.
like
No.
everyone, like we all collectively need to own it. It's not giving a single owner and thinking that's going to solve your problem, but it's someone who is being paid to think about serving as a champion for driving AI initiatives forward in the organization. Am I understanding that distinction?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Like even next week, I'm going to a workshop that originally was framed about like how do we take work from function X and how do we maybe move some of it to the partner organization or how do we move some of it to India was the initial framing of the workshop, right? And again, what this champion was a lot said, hey guys, before we get to either of those two layers or those two roads, right? The first layer is how do we think about AI, right? What's removed out of that function with AI, and then it goes down those two roads, right? And so it's someone who's just essentially a filter for those people to say, wait, are you thinking about AI? Because maybe some people are thinking about it naturally, some people are not. Now
Mhm.
the whole front side of the workshop is great. Let's think about AI and where can we, with intentionality, put AI first as part of this kind of workflow.
Totally get it. So, Bradford, this one went by so fast. I'm already going to lead us into the lightning round here. So, just a couple of quick hit questions for you to wrap us up. First one is, what is one misconception that HR leaders have about AI adoption?
The entry level people don't have value. I would actually argue that it's probably, to me, the 4 to 10 year people are the ones that are the most at risk right now. The people that are ironically coming out of university right now who have been using AI for the last 3 years, who organically are coming in and understand why AI is the only way to go, are probably the most valuable. Like the kids right out of school right now probably have the most value in a lot of your organizations to come and superpower your more senior executives.
I could turn that one into a podcast in itself with you. I have college age kids, and I do want to talk about this more after the show for sure. I'm going to bring you to the next one. If
Okay.
you had to consolidate to a single tech platform or go with best in breed tech solutions, maybe including an AI bot in there, which way would you go and why?
Best in breed.
Love it. Me
And
too.
probably just because and again, with the asterisk being maybe someone one day will be able to create a all-in-one, but they don't exist on the market today.
100%. And yes, you're making trade-offs. I am highly aligned with that answer. So as you were talking, Bradford, I always try to get some nuggets of wisdom to recap with the audience. So let's see how I did here. My first note was that there is magic in being able to connect disparate data faster than we ever have before. So this idea of moving from the signal or the having of the data to action to a result. And you shared some really great examples when we talked about that. Second, I'm going back to the visualization comment that you made when we talked about building trust. So build trust with your teams by helping them visualize where their jobs are headed, where you're headed with AI. Like they do need to see it, to believe it, and to trust you. And I think that's an excellent bit of advice on how to build trust. And then the last one is I loved the concept of learning labs. So building capability via what you described as learning labs. So the idea of hands-on tools, right? Learn with people while doing. This is not something that is best learned you absorb or taught information. You just take it in like this is a hands-on thing. So lots more in the show that I'm sure our listeners will get, but we always leave guests with the last word. What is one piece of advice that you would give to HR leaders who are just at the start of their AI journey?
I would go with one of my favorite Chinese proverbs, which is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now, which is, again,
I love it. I love it. It's true. And it's not too late. That is a clear message of it is not too late. Just get going. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It was a great conversation and so fun to talk to you.
always a pleasure. Thanks, Barb.
Thank you for joining us on The Human Element, presented by Whisk. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow The Human Element wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Barb Bidan. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.